Welcome to the skating lesson. I'm Jennifer Kirk.
And I'm Dave Leese, and today we are thrilled to interview Olympic bronze medalist and commentator extraordinaire, Tracy Wilson.
Well, Tracy, welcome to the skating lesson. We're very excited to speak to you. A couple weeks ago, Dave and I were raving about how much we enjoyed your commentary at Canadian Nationals, so it's very much a pleasure to have you here. And one of the things we noticed in your bio, you only went to college for one semester.
Yes.
You don't have a degree in journalism. You didn't take a bunch of broadcasting courses. So where did your talent come from, the broadcasting talent? Were you a natural public speaker as a child?
That's interesting you say that. I actually studied public speaking. And so when I was growing up, I grew up in Port Moody, British Columbia, and then to look for a skating partner, I left home about 17 or 18 and went to Toronto. And so that's why I did the one semester at university. And then when I was in Toronto, we just financially couldn't manage school and the skating. And my dad said, you need to do something else than just be with 6 or 8 people at the rink. And so he had studied Toastmasters International, which is a public speaking course. And I did that for years as I trained, and then did a lot of public speaking gigs to help pay for my skating.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, media bios are always amusing. The skating media tends to latch on to one thing and really run with it. So your skating bio would say that you were a competitive swimmer and that you became an ice dancer at 15, but it never mentioned anything in between there. So given your edges, I'm guessing you skated as a child. So when did you start actually skating?
I started taking lessons when I was about 7. So I swam competitively in the summer and skated in the winter. And I was a single skater until I was about 15 or 16. And probably novice. I was up to the novice level. And I blew out my knee. So I had to take a year off the ice. We didn't have the scope surgery back in the day. And so I took a year off, and then I came back and I did ice dance and singles. I really loved the singles. My mom talked me into the dance. And then I fell in love with Moiseev and Minenkov. And that's sort of what I loved about ice dance. And my knee couldn't stand up to the jumping and falling. And so that's when I pursued ice dance at about 15 or 16.
How did your mom talk you into ice dance?
I think the writing was on the wall that I was 5'6". I was working on a double axel, and I was 14 years of age. And she sort of knew that the end was coming quickly. But she also knew that I loved the artistic side. As much as I liked the athletic side, I also loved interpreting the music. And I never really won any awards in singles except for an artistic award. So that's so she said, give it a try. And when there I am in Port Moody, and which is a tiny town of 10,000 people. And there was a coach who knew of somebody who knew of somebody who knew of a skating partner. So his name was Mark Stokes. And I think after 2 years, we won nationals at the junior level. I skated with him for 1 year at seniors. And then, as luck would have it, Rob McCall needed a partner, and there was nobody else. So that's sort of when my skating career took off.
What were your initial impressions of Rob?
Oh, I loved him. The first time I met him, I was at Canadian Championships in Halifax. I was skating with Mark in seniors. I think we were 6th that year, and Rob had won his first Canadian title with Marie McNeil. And I could hear this laughter coming out of a hotel room, and there were all of these judges sitting around in a circle, and Rob was on the floor entertaining them, telling them the most crazy jokes, off-colored jokes. And anyway, that's when I thought, oh my gosh, I fell in love with him there. And then to skate with him, he was just this supreme talent. And my job became learning from him and controlling him and sort of helping to channel it.
I was going to say, you've described yourself as the athlete, and he was the comedian. So did it ever get to the point during practice where he just drove you crazy? How did you keep him in line during those training sessions?
Good question. It was actually, we went through a few years of tough times because you know how you get that sense of whatever you are, that's what's right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
We
so,
all think we're the best. Yeah.
yes. So for me, it was about training. It was about discipline, getting your sleep, eating properly, doing the run-throughs over and over. And fortunately, Rob just loved to skate, so he worked harder than anybody else. You just had to sort of get him there. But we ended up sort of arriving at a situation that worked for both of us. And we did work with a sports psychologist / marriage counselor to help us sort of work together. And basically, we just started to play to each other's strengths. So I knew, I mean, there was no more talented person artistically. There was no more harder worker than Rob. You just had to organize him. So he'd get a call from me in the morning. Oh, hi, just saying good morning, be there in 15 minutes. We would stop and pick up I'd get an Egg McMuffin. He'd have pancakes from McDonald's on the way to the rink. That way I made sure he ate. And then I worked out the schedule basically of, okay, I got to give him about 20 minutes just to skate and to skate to music and let him be. He could do triple jumps and dance blades. You know, that's the sort of, so he'd go off and do that. Often I'd watch him as he was exploring different themes of music. He'd come up with these great steps. He would never remember them. I'd teach them back to him and they'd go into our free dance. But we really found, he just sort of respected what I stood for and I him. And when we finally decided that that's what mattered and whatever was most important for the team, when we always put that first, then we had some glorious years together.
Well, the 80s were a very different time. In your 88 Up Close and Personal piece that ABC Sports did, Dick Button pointed out that this was not a romantic pairing. And it's funny, they show you competing in a swimming race against one another. Yes. You're barbecuing. Rob is fine dining. They're talking that he loves dinner parties and gourmet cooking. And there's some innuendo. And nowadays we see skaters like Eric Radford and Adam Rapon who are out while competing and no one thinks twice about it. So what was it like then? Was it an open secret? Was it ever even discussed?
Rob was the most open person, but I think with respect to his time. And I mean, a big point came for us when Rob was diagnosed with AIDS. And he had asked me not to disclose that he was homosexual. And I was shocked. And I remember calling my mother about it. And of course, as I said, I was from a small town. And she said, Tracy, in this day and age, there will be a lot of discrimination and hard feelings and people who won't understand. And you need to respect exactly what he wants and his wishes. So that's, yeah, but at the same time, Rob was so true to himself. And he and Brian Orser and I were really good friends back then. And some of their good friends, my husband was a rugby player, as you saw in the Up Close and Personal. And we used to hang out with the rugby team all the time. And so there was one flight, we were going to Aspen to do a show on Boxing Day. And the plane got canceled because of snow. And so I called my husband and he says, oh, I'm with the guys. We're all playing poker. It's Boxing Day. That's what the rugby players do that day. We're all in cards. Rob and Brian, bring them over. They love cards. So there they sat drinking beer and playing poker with the rugby guys. So it was really, they were so accepted. Each accepted each other and the different lifestyles. And so it was very, very healthy, but how wonderful in this day and age you can truly be who you are.
Well, competing in the 80s, you were against many dramatic rivals, including Bespianova and Bugin, and Anenko and Strutinsky. But your programs weren't really dramatic or theatrical in that way. So was this a conscious choice? I mean, did you ever want to have a dramatic Tarasova moment on the ice?
Yes, I would have loved to have had the Tarasova moment. I lived for the drama. However, I looked at myself and sized up my skills. And again, Rob was 5'10", I was 5'6", not a lot of height difference. I also was not trained in the Bolshoi. I did some modern dance, but again, an athletic background. And I knew as soon as I went to more artistic ballet, I mean, I was going to be compared to all the other beautiful black swans and I wouldn't fit. And so we looked to play to our strengths and we really had to work hard at that. And we loved footwork. And at that time, that was our quad. You know, we had so many lift restrictions back then, and also our height, lack of height differential sort of took away from that. So we really went into the footwork. We loved the rhythm and the syncopation of the music. And so that's where we tried to push our programs, that by using the rhythm and the syncopation, we would bring the audience emotionally into the program through the music. Then the other thing was humor. And so we would play off the humor. But, you know, we did spice it up a bit. I don't know if you remember our 84 Olympics in Sarajevo. We sort of did the spy and the seductress. And so we sort of played that game. And there was one point in Ottawa, and we still laugh about it, because we did a part where we would both sort of snuggle cheek to cheek and sort of look up and ask for help. And I don't know what got into Rob, but he sort of nuzzled in and kind of felt like he was kissing my neck, right? And I literally went like this, turned around and went, what? And we're in the middle of the program, and he was sort of laughing at me, but you know, it sort of all just brought out the connection between us. But again, back to your point, we looked at what we could bring that was unique to the sport, that would be unique to that actual competition. And then we really, really worked to sort of engage the audience, because for us, that's what it was about.
Well, you talk about, Tracy, having more steps in your program. And at that Olympics in 1984, Dick Button was incredibly complimentary of your performances. And Peggy in the free dance, she was a little bit more the harsh critic. She thought that you could use a bit more complexity. And you did over the next few years. So when you were skating, would you watch a broadcast? How much did you pay attention to what the commentators were saying about your performances?
I would listen. Very much. And we used to, Taller Cranston did a lot of the commentary. So that was a lot of fun to listen to if you could laugh at yourself. And fortunately, Rob and I could. But yes, we would listen. But, you know, you just have to be so careful and not take yourself off your track. As soon as you start playing somebody else's game, you can get lost really quickly. Mm-hmm. And so we would listen, you take the bits that could help you, but there were also things that you couldn't change. And so you knew you just had to sort of play to your strength.
Well, at those Olympics, you competed against Torvill and Dean. And it seems that whenever the female commentators, especially the ice dancers, speak of Christopher Dean, there is a real reverence. He was really to your era what Michelle Kwan was to ours. So just how good were Torvill and Dean, and what made them so good?
What made them so good? They were ahead of their time. They took the sport of ice dance. They brought so much discipline to it and integrity to it. And what they did was ice dance back in the day. I mean, my friends used to call us prancers, and they wouldn't take it seriously, which is why Rob honed the art of triple jumps, because when the pair skaters started to give him a tough time, he'd go, oh yeah, watch this, right? And what Jane Torvill and Christopher Dean did technically and artistically is they brought the sport of ice dance forward, and really it was a sport when they did it. It wasn't just the artistic side and the drama and pretty skating that was being featured. They brought it into the public so that the athletes, the artists, the football players, the ballet dancers all could equally appreciate it. And it was such an honor. And people would say, you're competing against Torvill and Dean. Well, I'm in the same competition, right? And you could sit and you could learn so much from them. And one of the greatest memories I have at the Sarajevo Olympics is we had a practice at 6:45 in the morning, and Jane and Chris had the 6 a.m. practice. And so Rob and I went into the rink and we were warming up, and there was nobody there. There was only Jane and Chris from their practice group and Rob and I from mine. And we literally stood in the empty arena at the Olympics, and every time they stepped on the ice, they did a full run through. And we literally stood there, Rob and I, and watched the full run through of their program. And it was just beautiful. And it was a moment I won't forget.
Well, at those Olympics, there was some controversy that Bloomberg and Siebert deserved the bronze. Do you feel they did? And did that make you at all concerned about your own chances as a non-Soviet skater?
Yes, for sure. I felt Bloomberg and Siebert consistently got in the judges' mix and came out on the lesser end of the scale. And yes, I also had learned at that point and through the years that okay, the cream will rise to the top. But what my be all and end all cannot be about my placement because I'll be giving up way too much power and then it's the tail that's wagging the dog. And so that's where so much of it for Rob and I came about affecting the audience. And so I remember actually my very first year with Rob in Copenhagen. And I literally, the year before, was 6 at Canadians in my first year in senior. There I was. Rob and I had partnered together in August. Now I'm a Canadian champion and I'm at Worlds. And wouldn't you know it, guess whose practice group I'm on? Moiseev and Minikov. And those were the two that had moved me so much and moved me into the sport of ice dance. Well, I was tripping over myself, trying to stay out of their way and also wanting to watch them. And our technical head of Skate Canada, Barbara Graham, after that practice, came up to me and said, "What happened? You look like you didn't belong out there." And I'm like, oh my God, I felt like I didn't belong out there. And it was sort of one of those aha moments, like, how do I get the courage to go out there and skate? Because, you know, if you look at it, I didn't have their training. I didn't have their talent, her beautiful body, their gorgeous costumes, the choreography. I mean, it was like lose, lose, lose on every measure. And so I had to go to a different place. And it was like, well, what can I sort of build on? Well, I had a fabulous partner in Rob, and I had a second chance to skate. Those two things. We had great choreography. And actually, we may not be as good as the others, but people liked our stuff. And so that was sort of enough to get me in the game and get me started. And I also said to myself, if I'm ever to be what these great Soviet skaters are, I have to go in my first Worlds. And I have to do it to get where they are. So that gave me the courage. And then the real inspiration was, how can we leave our mark on the sport? How can we make the sport better? How can we really affect the audience and bring them in and make a memorable performance for them? And so the idea of trying to win and to beat the Soviets was very, very powerful in practice. Oh, I got a long way to go to catch Besmiova and Buchan. Another run through. But when we got to the competition, then it became a different focus.
Well, you started to gain serious traction in 1986 when you won your first world medal, and talk about how difficult it was to rise through the ranks. So what did that experience mean? I know you focused so much on just doing your best and really playing for the audience, but what did it mean to win that world medal?
It was an incredible moment. And it was one of those where, you know, you're motivated by something and you put out winning and being better. But I don't know that I dared to dream it, if you know what I mean. It's like out there, but then the reality of it, it was just so satisfying. That I guess, and then for Calgary, I was just overwhelmed by gratitude to have the opportunities to be surrounded by the people that supported us to get to that place, to have a partner like Rob, to have those moments, just gratitude.
Well, you were competing during a time when the Soviets had 3 or 4 of the 4 top dance teams, and they probably could have swept the podium pretty easily. So how did you manage to stay ahead?
I really studied. I studied them a lot, I have to be honest, and I learned from them because I had come up in a rigid sort of school of ice dance, which was more British. And I really started to try to open my horizons and say, okay, what else is there? What more can we learn? Like you mentioned, Anenko and Stratensky. Oh my goodness, nobody had more beautiful, beautiful compulsory dances than those two. And it's a shame back in the day that they weren't rewarded in the way they would be now. And I learned so much from watching them about the rise and fall of the knee, about weight transfer. So I really looked to them for inspiration and also lessons in how to do it and how to be better.
And did you ever feel held down by the judges during that time?
Did I feel held down by the judges? I think there was a sense that It didn't, okay, how I felt was if I was going to be better, if we were going to win, we had to be that much better. You're not going to be as good. But also, it's hard to measure. How can you, I mean, I could watch Bestmianov and Buchan and absolutely be blown away by what they did. So how do you measure? How could you quantify what it was? So I got that. And that's, I think, where the skaters today, because they can sort of sink their teeth in something, I just, I feel just so great for them that the way the sport has changed, so that they can rise up and they can play to their strength, and there is a quantifiable way of evaluating it.
With so much talk about the judging back then in the '88 Olympics, do you think that placement was in the correct order? In your opinion, how should the placement have been?
Well, it's hard to say because then you have to go back and look at every single dance, and the compulsory dances. So I could say, well, a lot of people thought our free dance should have been higher. However, I have to be totally honest. For me, I haven't been able to kind of sit back and go to that place where because, and again, first of it, you've got 3 compulsory dances. You have an original dance. So if I have to be honest, well, where do I think in the whole, where should I be in the Killiam? Where should blah, blah, blah. So I sort of passed that. But one of the real moments for me was John Curry, who I admired. He came up to me a year later and just said, I thought your free dance should have won. It was that sort of those moments of validation. And so it was not, I got robbed. There were moments of validation, which is wonderful in the sport because we all have our favorite skaters. And Toller was always mine growing up, Toller Cranston, and he never came higher than 3rd. And but he changed the sport. So there's different ways, yeah.
We talk about Toller at the 1988 World Championships. He was adamant that he wanted you and Rob to stay around to win a world title. Did you ever consider staying around for another couple seasons?
Well, we did talk about it, and we were asked, and we couldn't imagine that trumping what we'd done. And so we felt at that point we had given our all. We had done what we could for the sport. And professional skating was really exciting back then, too. It wasn't, of course, about the money in those days because there wasn't a lot of money. But Stars on Ice, I think, was in its 2nd year. There was Symphony on Ice. There were all these shows that were sort of building. And we were able to kind of get into the ground level of those shows and then learn a whole other aspect of our skating.
Do you think you could have been world champions?
I have no idea. I guess could have, but there were a lot of good skaters coming through at that point, and so no, it definitely wasn't a given. I mean, we could have scrapped and got lucky, but yeah.
Well, we did see the Duchesnays rise to be world champions. Now, 2 questions: is it Duchesnay or Duchesny? Because the commentators would always say 2 different words.
Yes.
And did you ever compete against them before they became
Yes.
French?
Yes. So I used to actually train with them and competed against them, and they were the Duchesnys. So, the brother and sister Duchesnys growing up in Canada, when they went to France, it became the Duchesnays. Okay. And then I think at the end of their career, they went back to the Duchesnys. So I think it's Duchesny now. And yeah, so...
Well, you toured with Stars on Ice for 2 years before Rob became sick and you went on to have a family. When did you first learn about his illness?
Right, last minute. So he, for the first time, it was 2 years almost to the day of the Olympics, and he missed a show and hadn't been feeling well. And so I just, at that point, was really worried. Because there was pneumonia-like symptoms. And so he'd been to the doctor, and the doctor had said, nope, he's fine. They were just treating it. And so we had talked, and then we were just going to do the Boitano Wit Tour in Portland, Maine, the training for it. And so Rob had been off for 2 weeks, and I met him in the airport to fly down. And when I saw him, I knew. And literally just went into the washroom and started to cry, and then had to sort of fix my face and my composure. and come back and talk to him because he wasn't there yet at that point where he was pushing through. And so we just sort of, some of his friends and Barb Underhill, we gently sort of say, do you want to see the doctor here? And how are you feeling? He says, no, I'm good. Everything's good. And so we did the training. But you could tell how, because he'd lost so much weight and he really didn't look himself. And we went to do the dress rehearsal. And so at the dress rehearsal, he collapsed on the ice. And so we took him into the hospital, and that's when they did some tests and they told him there. And I left the hospital, and he said, okay, you better go back and let them know at the show. And I walked into the arena, and it was now that night with the dress rehearsal, and they were playing the introductions. And the ice was black, and the spotlight lit. It said Tracy Wilson and Rob McCall, and the spotlight went out. Mm-hmm. And it was just sort of one of those moments that, and the skaters sort of gathered around, and that was at Portland, Maine, and that was sort of where he ended up being there for a few weeks to get healthy enough before coming back to Toronto.
At that point, did you have a plan in place for life after skating and touring? Was it something where you had kind of planned that something could happen, or was it a complete shock of what am I going to do now?
Oh, I had always planned, Jenny, because I never thought I had the talent to sort of be a competitive skater. I mean, literally started with Rob when I was, 19. So I definitely had looked at skating as something that I would do until I went on to and kind of a real job. And I didn't know if it was going to be business or public speaking or television or what. But even when we were on the road touring, I was actually studying. And Rob and I had talked around after Calgary. And we had agreed to 2 years. And I said to him, Brad and I want to have a family. I was, in my late 20s. So I said, let's for 2 years do whatever we can. And then after that, it's going to be, okay, does it fit with you? Does it fit with me? But for 2 years, we'll do everything. But, so I had thought about it, but the greater loss was Rob. And then not having what I love to do, to use as therapy to help transition myself through the healing.
Well, after Rob passed away, you skated a solo in the tribute show dedicated to him. So how difficult was that for you?
Oh, I didn't really want to get on the ice because being on the ice meant it's just brought everything out that, your half was missing. So it was very difficult. But what pushed us forward, there were some beautiful skaters and his friends in the show, and we were all united in honoring him, honoring our other friends, Andre Denis, who was our off-ice dance teacher, who also had the dream of wanting to do an AIDS benefit, and Rob had picked that idea up for him. So that's all of that. You just moved to a different place in their honor.
You made such a seamless transition then to work as a commentator. Did you have any embarrassing moments or struggles starting out? It just seemed like this was such a natural fit for you.
I had so many.
Really?
So many, yes, I did. But I had the opportunity in Canada. I got taken on with Rod Black, who now we work together doing the skating. But right away, I was taken on with him as a sports commentator. So I actually wasn't going to do skating commentary. It was going to be all sports. And so I got myself in a pickle a couple of times, reading live baseball highlights, and the highlights were late, and I'm trying to call baseball. And so, and your brain's going, every single guy out there is watching, going,
who is this girl? What is she
anyway. But no, I did. I definitely did, but I had 2 years of cutting my teeth at that and doing different sports. I had a chance to co-host the Summer Olympics in Barcelona, but I had a son, Shane, and then I was pregnant with Ryan, And then shortly after that, Emma came along. And so that's when I ended up going into the skating, because it would allow me to go away on weekends and do the skating and be with all my friends in a sport I loved, and then be at home with the kids most of the time.
Well, it seemed like you had to have some fun as a commentator. I'll always remember in '94, you got to show a stopwatch on the screen of how long Grishuk and Platov skated out of hold for, which was one of the rules at that time. So I have to ask, do you have any doubt in '94 that Torvill and Dean deserved to win?
Well, yes. Do I have any doubt? Okay, what I felt was I believed in what they did, and I believed in where they took the sport of ice dance. So Torvill and Dean and what they stood for and their style of skating is what I felt was what should be coming to the forefront. And my concern was it had to be a sport. Otherwise, it's gone from the Olympics. So when it becomes more an art, and see, back in the day when I competed in '84 and '88, whenever I would do the media requests, literally 95% of the questions from the sports reporters was, why is ice dance a sport? Why is ice dance in the Olympics? And I have to say, it was really important to me that ice dance was in the Olympics, and that it stayed there, and that it was a sport, and that was valued in it. And so I think all of that came into the play with my analysis with Torvill and Dean. It was personal. It was personal for the sport as much as what they did. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
And so the highlighting for me, the spaces where you're not skating together, was it effective choreography? Absolutely. Was it difficult? No. And if you have those moments where you're skating apart, now how is it different than pairs? You know, it's like what? So there were it brought a lot of those questions into play.
Well, 4 years later, you appear to seemingly have had it with the antics of the judges during the '98 Olympic Games, and you started to pay very close attention to the block judging throughout the year, both at the test event and then at the Olympics. So were you tipped off about the judging, or had you always kind of paid attention to the ordinals as a skater?
No, I hadn't paid attention too much. And I didn't want it to be about that. And I really resented it when all the focus was put on the judging, because that would have been the other thing in '88 after the Olympics, but nobody moved. How could you be third in the first dance, second dance, third, So always answering questions about judging. However, you couldn't escape it. And when I really started to sort of look into it, and I thought, okay, I'm a commentator now. I have to, eyes wide open, I have to look at this whole argument that's out there and understand it, and then come up with my opinion. I can't just go with, I don't want it to be all about the judges. And so I really did look at it. And I started to pay more attention to the judging panel. And what I started to notice, well, you know, when they'd go into a room to draw the judges, the skaters would go for the judges' draw, and there was more emotion from the skaters when the judges were drawn than they gave in the kiss and cry when their marks came up, because they knew. And then I'd start to talk to my friends, the Tatiana Tarasova and Dubova, and you know they're going to have their biases and their slants and their students. But when Tarasova, when I'm talking to her about Yugudin, she's passionate and talking about the Olympics. And then I mentioned the dance, and she's like, it's a dance. You know what's going to happen. Okay, so that's a leading coach. And then in Nagano, I heard everything, and I had understood how the block judging could work. And I saw the draw. I had a U.S. official come up to me and say, Tracy, and I didn't know this gentleman that well. And he said, Tracy, I got to tell you, watch the first dance. Everything is going to happen on the first dance. That first compulsory and how it's judged, because remember, it was ordinals back then. And you watch Elizabeth Punselin and Jared Swallow and watch their scores. And they were fabulous compulsory dancers. And a Canadian official came up and told me the same thing and told me where Shaylin and Victor were going to finish in the first dance. Okay, so I had that. I had Russian judges. I had Russian coaches. I had coaches from other countries. Nobody believed in it. And the skaters didn't believe in it. And so I thought, what's left? And I sat down with Vern Lundquist and Scott Hamilton. And Scotty, God bless him, said, you know what you should do? He says, write down what you've been told the results are going to be and put it in an envelope. And then wait and see how it is and open the envelope. And I didn't have the courage to do it and the experience to do it, and I didn't. However, when the marks came up and the first two Russian teams, the top place team made a small error and the second place didn't. Krylov and Yanikov didn't. And that was the other thing for me, because if the judges were judging it, they would have done it. Two Russian teams, it doesn't matter. It's not. And Victor and Shaylin, what were they? 5th, so they couldn't possibly get to the podium. Punselin and Swallow were 8, so they were also put. And so everything happened that I was told would happen. And I lost it. And I thought I either have to make something up and sort of go along with it. And I didn't believe that. And I felt like if the skaters believed, I'm with them. I'm with them. This is their sport. But when the skaters don't believe in the coaches, and I've got officials telling me, so it was pretty drastic. And I was also prepared at that point to walk away because I knew I was putting my job on the line, but it just sort of came down to there was nowhere else to go.
Well, whistleblowers aren't always very well received. So did you receive any sort of criticism or backlash from the skating community after your commentary on the judging?
Yeah, I did a little bit, Jenny, and mostly because a lot of it was around Shaylin and Victor, who didn't win a medal, and I'm Canadian and they were Canadian. But I feel like I knew that was a possibility, but I had to go with it, and I had to trust my intentions, and then I think my history in the sport is that most of the people got it, really, and I had more. So if I had 20% criticism, I had 80%, probably 50% people actually coming up and thanking, and the rest were just sort of, whatever. So.
Well, I grew up loving Grishik and Platov's over-the-top free dance in Nagano, and I really felt that you did not at that time. I could never get on board with Krylova's eye contact, even though mine are very similar. But were Grishik and Platov the strongest team?
Were they the strongest team? They had many great strengths. And so for them to be honored that way, is it wrong? Not at all. Not at all. Again, I want to see the close dance positions. I want to see the footwork. I want to see the detail. I don't want it to be free, a total freedom of whatever. There has to be some detail, and so that's where that was my opinion, and that's what I stood by in terms of a ice dance sort of purist. Was what Grishik and Platov did valid? Was it beautiful? Was it emotionally captivating? Was it worthy of everything they got? Yes, absolutely.
Did Born and Kratz deserve the bronze?
Did they? I believe they deserve the chance to win the bronze. I think that's where ultimately they deserved that chance, and that chance was taken away on the first dance.
Mm-hmm. Well, more recently, there was controversy from the Canadian and French press prior to the Sochi Olympics that Virtue and Moyer were going to lose the gold and that a deal had been made. And we covered the dance leading up to it. And I remember feeling is that we felt that Virtue and Moyer's free dance was uninspired that season because it was a sequel, and that they had also made a lot of mistakes in competition throughout the 2.5 years before that gave this impression that Davis and White were stronger. So do you have a take on this? I mean, where did you see the difference between the two teams, and do you feel that a deal was in place before the Olympics?
Yeah, I didn't hold any weight in the deals,
Mm-hmm.
And I think again, you can look into things and you can make up some fabulous stories. And I don't know what was true or what wasn't. Like you, I know what I saw, and I saw a buildup. There was some vulnerability. And Davis and White exploited the fact that they were trained, that they were ready, that they had strong programs, fabulous music. And so, no, I didn't hold any weight in a judging fiasco. I really feel you have to earn it. I find sometimes the ice dance can be like the components in single skating. And it's hard fought. You scrap your way to sort of get there and to earn it. So no, I didn't have a problem with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, recently we watched Canadian television, and you, Rod Black, Tessa Virtue, and Scott Moyer had a very in-depth discussion about Weaver and Poget's chances to be world champions, but Papadakis and Cizeron were never mentioned. So we've joked about this in Canadian coverage, and we discussed how the Canadian media appears to be very supportive of their skaters, where the U.S. prefers to really focus on the comparisons and rivalries. So is this correct? Is there a difference with Canadian commentary and U.S. commentary?
Well, I do both, and I do both the same way. However, a nationals is it's a different place than an international. And the national is about the national stories. And I believe I asked Tessa about who she thought the competition was, and she did say the French, but she didn't expound on it. And I think at that point, perhaps hadn't had a chance to see them yet because we saw their competition after at Europeans. So for Canadians, the Canadian Championships is U.S. Nationals, and in Canada with CTV, it's about the stories of it's the provinces, it's the small towns coming together, it's the kids tasting the spotlight for the first time, being on the ice with their idols, and a lot of those stories, and it's a measure of who's there at that competition and how they relate to each other. However, to move it into the world scene tends to be more in the international vein. I mean, for sure, for Patrick Chan, it was all about he had to get a short program out there if he was going to have any chance to compete and do well down the road. And so there was an international flavor to that, but that's where the coverage was a little more. I mean, we would give a world score in terms of where they are relative to the rest of the world and to their best, and then other than that, it was very much the competition within itself.
Papadakis and Cizeron, they received rave reviews for their free dance at Europeans. In your opinion, are they the best in the world at this point?
Are they the best in the world? I'd like to see them on the ice, in the live, to actually make that kind of a statement, Jenny. And the Shibutanis are getting rave reviews as well for their free dance. It so is bringing them to the forefront. Weaver and Poget have some great moments in their free dance as well. I think it really has to be one of those, because if you are going to make that definitive statement about the teams, you've got to take into play speed, the feeling, the emotion, the energy in the arena. I would say Papadakis and Cizeron are the team to beat.
Mm-hmm. How good are Guillaume Cizeron's skating skills?
Well, they're beautiful. They have such an ease. The balance is never in question. The tension, you don't feel the tension between them, which says not only are they individually balanced, but as a team, the balances and the sensitivity between them is beautiful. And then to watch the shapes they make, they kind of fold into each other and out of each other and around each other in such a fluid way.
They haven't historically done well in the short dance, though. They were fourth at the World Championships, second at Europeans. So to what do you attribute their weakness in that portion of the event?
I think it's sort of like the short dance is like being put in a bit of a box. And the restrictions, it kind of takes away from what they do so well, which is the fluidity and the ease. And so all of a sudden you're put into a box and say, okay, deal with this, which is fine. And I think that's just something that's also very, very punitive. And so that brain has to go, like we saw that with Davis and White. They could do that so well because of technically they could get themselves into the place where they had to nail the levels and the edges and the details, but could keep the freedom and the artistry. And so that balance is so hard. That's so hard to find, and that's something that Papadakis sees her own if they are to be the contenders and the top team. They're going to have to find that balance because the field is so tight and so close, and you see what can happen in a short dance and how that can affect it going forward into the free.
Now, at Canadian Nationals, you did let us know that Patrick Chan and his coach have an interesting dynamic. Now, it's also noted that he doesn't really have a true traditional jump coach, and he's up against men who are consistently adding quads left and right, including several of your students. So what is your take on his reluctance to get a jump coach?
Well, I think he has found a relationship in Kathy that really suits him. I think this, for Patrick, this comeback is about skating, but I think it's a lot as much about him as a person and personal growth. And so if he's going to find himself and feels he knows himself technically, and that what Kathy brings to him will honor what he needs and can back it up. I mean, only he knows that. I don't know that it's absolute that this is how it's going to stay going forward. I think he's going to see where it takes him. And and what he really needs to know, and that's what, if you've listened to all of his interviews, and I know you read about him in the media, he mentioned when Yuruzu's world-breaking scores came up, well, now I know that's where that is. What he hasn't answered is, what is my top mark when I'm clean in the short and clean in the long? Where does that take me? And then what do I have to add in? Well, we know he's already added in a second triple axel, and is he going to have to add in more quads? Yes. I mean, we see that writing's on the wall, but I think Patrick, in his comeback and the stages that he's taking on that comeback, he's got to answer some questions before he gets there.
Well, at U.S. Nationals, we did miss your input when the Shibutanis finally beat Chalk and Bates, and those teams have been debated for some time, and we've debated it on here. And we were actually happy to see the free dance of the moment at Nationals win, which was really the surprising part there. Do you think a country still needs to decide which team to back for a medal? I think you don't.
Sorry, I don't. I agree with you. It's great. It's great for the sport, and it's great for the dance teams, for Chalk and Bates and the Shibutanis to go back and forth. It's going to make both teams better, and I think it's a 1-2 punch for U.S. skating. And so for sure, the worst feeling is when you feel like everybody else wants that other team and you're getting preferential treatment for whatever. I mean, you're better off. Okay, and I know for Chalk and Bates, they've gone through some material shifts this season. They're going to be pushed, and that's good for them. And it's great for the Shibutanis, and it's great to see because they've skated it so well this year in competition. They were fantastic at the final with it, and so for them to be rewarded on the night, I think that's fabulous. And I think it's great for U.S. skating. I don't think you have to protect that one team.
Well, in addition to your work as a commentator, Tracy, you also work as a coach at the Toronto Cricket and Curling Club alongside Brian Orser, former friend. So what is your role as a coach? What is your day-to-day role there?
Brian and I took over the cricket club 10 years ago, something like that, and they didn't have any coaches. And we had both skated there, and we knew people at the club, and they asked us to come in and help. And Brian lived in Ottawa. I was doing the commentary, busy with the kids, and we just said we really can't. But Brian had said to me that he really wanted to become a coach. And we both knew that turning down that offer, chances are wouldn't come again. So I said, well, what if I help you? You get in there, I'll just help you. Whatever you need. I'm in Toronto. I like to organize, as you know, and so we'll come up with some structure and you do what you do. So we did that for 3 months. We thought we'd hire some coaches. And what ended up happening was we did hire coaches, but we fell in love with it. And we fell in love with being on the ice and skating. And so we took over the role as skating. I think we're called directors. And so and the philosophy that we both shared is one of the number one goal is to make the sport better. It's not, and both of us saw how much just going for your country can tear the sport apart. So if everybody in Canada is just going for the Canadian skaters and the US skaters and the Russian, it becomes, no. Just reward who's best. Everybody will get it. Every skater will get that, and then they'll be better trying to beat it. And that became our philosophy at the cricket club. It also became it has a history of producing and bringing wonderful skaters to the club. Dorothy Hamill would be there in the summer. Skaters would drop in from around the world and skate there. We wanted it to be that. We wanted it to be a place of skating, of skaters, of where coaches could get together and work together. And it's been a really interesting process, but so rewarding. And our doors are open in terms of who comes in. And so that very first year, Joanne Rochette would be on the ice, and I'd be helping her with skating skills. Brian would be helping her with some technical jumps. Then Yuna Kim dropped in. And so she came to do some choreography with David Wilson. Brian started helping her with a triple axel. Her mother saw me working on skating skills with Zhen and Zhao and said, can you do that with her? And it just sort of, the whole thing took off. And so basically what I do now is I keep trying to foster the team environment, support the skaters and the coaches that are there. Skaters also come in from all over, and we don't close the door and say, okay, Gabby trains here, so Veronique Millet can't come in. No, come on in, come and skate. And so it's a collaborative effort. It's been really fun to work with Brian. We and David Wilson, we tend to kind of have the same philosophies. We have these years of friendship together, and we build on that. And it's sort of like, sometimes like before the Olympics in Vancouver, I think it was like 2 weeks before, and Brian's talking to Yuna, and he's just like, oh my God, you're it, tag, you're it. And so I sort of came in and started talking, and then David Wilson, and before you know it, she's just bawling. She just needed the release, and in her culture, she wasn't able to do that in front of the coach, but she could do it with us. And so it's sort of all of that, and we learn from each other. And for me, had been doing a lot of singles commentary, and I wanted to learn more. I wanted my eye to be sharp. I wanted to know what a quad looked like and what made it work and what doesn't work. And so it's really fun. And the guys will, Javier will listen to me. He'll come up and he'll look at me, and I kind of do the gulp. Okay, here it is. And I have Brian and all the other coaches there as a sounding board. I said, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I feel. And they're like, yeah. And then, Brian, how do you say it? I say it like that, and the shoulder then through. And okay, great. So you can reinforce each other. And it's the same thing with the ice dance and the stroking skills. I pass that on to them. I collaborate with the coaches and with the skaters, and we just keep coming up with new stuff to help train the foundations.
Well, you coach the amazing Yuzuru Hanyu, and we don't see many English-speaking interviews with him. So what is he like on and off the ice and as a student?
He's very much a student of the sport, as much as he's accomplished. He's got the humility. He still wants to learn. He's young and fun and giggly. Like he'll laugh easily, and he celebrates the other skaters. He will cheer them on. He'll be the first one to cheer on one of the skaters. He'll be out there in the stroking classes. He'll push himself to the limit. He will get up and back off the ice, bow to the ice, thank it, touch it. shows respect for the other skaters. There was a skater once a few years back who got in his way, and I think the skater had his music on, and Yuruzu and him, and he had to stop, and the skater just sort of went blah, 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 right? And we went up to him and said, no, that doesn't cut it. But the funny thing was, Yuruzu was the first one to apologize. Yuruzu was the first one over, bowing and saying, I'm sorry, and it was a younger skater. And it's such a lesson to the different skaters from the different countries. You've got a Javi and a Yuruzu who work together, who are such gentlemen and are so good to the other skaters. They really set a standard. It's quite heartwarming, and it's empowering for everybody, because it's certainly not dog eat dog. I mean, they will watch each other and study each other. And, Yuruzu gets on the ice, and he is just quick twitch and go. He'll skate around the ice, all of a sudden, boom, triple axel, and everybody's going, okay, good morning, or whatever, right? He's brilliant that way, and it sort of lifts everybody to what's possible.
Well, he's really taken his skating to the next level this season. It's just been phenomenal. And one of the things, though, that Dave and I have noticed is it seems like sometimes his lines don't extend. He has almost like a club foot, and we don't know, is it a day of skates, or is it a situation where he needs to point his toe more? Have you addressed that at all in his training?
Totally. And he's a beautiful skater, and he has beautiful line and beautiful edge work. I think the issue becomes more with what he tries to take on in his program. And so if you ask Yuruzu to make it just one quad and the two triple axels and other triple jumps, you would start to see more line. You would see it's so exhausting, physically, emotionally, mentally, to think of all those things. You almost need a place where the body relaxes, and what you hope for is to build that line in by the time the World Championships come, because it is definitely there. And he is more than capable. It's being able to add all of that in with the jumps. And what you see him do is relax his body in between quite often, because the second half is coming. And that means another quad and then the two triple axels.
Well, we've seen a couple changes this season, one of which is he used to miss easy triples. A short program wasn't over with him. That lets you could never rely that he was going to actually land it. And it seems like that's better this season. We also see that at the end of his programs, he doesn't seem as winded. In the past, it was like he was just going to pass out at the end of the programs. So how have you addressed those two aspects of his training this season?
Well, for me, it's about quality in your training. And, perfect practice makes. And so when you watch a skater warm up, even when they get on the ice and stroke, it's mindless. Do, 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 do. And it's like, okay, what are you doing? Huh? And it's like, well, what are you doing there? Like, what is the reason for that exercise? What is the point of it? Other than just warming up your body, which you did off ice, what is the point of it? Well, the point of it is the feet come in together. You squeeze the inner thighs. You lift the body. You feel the rib cage. You feel the core support it. This is where you do your mindful work, because you don't have time to do that in the program. You've got all the jumping. So you better have built it out of the program. And then when you go to warm up your triples, you're not just warming up triple jumps and flopping and the whole bit. Where's your free leg? Where's your head? What's that body position going in, and the stroking? So it's really becoming aware of the detail in your training, and then you fit it into your program, because you do see it all the time, right? When you'll go into a practice rink and the skaters like doing their business and heads down, and then all of a sudden they go out and try to compete and they lift their head up. Well, that's a whole different thing. And all of a sudden the patterns are different in the long program than how they've been warming them up. Well, so it's things along those lines, and you don't have to tell Yuruzu much in terms of what he needs to do. He often will come to you in many ways. So after Skate Canada, he wasn't comfortable with his triple toe and the quad at the halfway. And, and he basically said, I'm comfortable with my long program. I've had good experience doing two quads off the top. And that's what I'd like to try. And it's like, are you kidding me? okay, here it goes. And so, so he's very, very aware himself.
Well, there's been so much talk about concussions this season after Joshua Ferris and Gabriela Papadakis suffered them. And last year, Hanyu had one of the worst collisions that we've ever seen at Cup of China. So given what we're learning about concussions, should he have skated there, looking back?
Well, my understanding was he was cleared. And and he was told clearly by Brian, you don't need to do this. And an athlete is an athlete. And so he had clearance, whatever tests were done backstage, he was cleared to do it. I believe I know if Brian had felt there was wooziness or any of that, he never would have gone on the ice. And so there was discussion, there was talk, there was coherency. He also has a trainer with him who spoke Japanese, who was able to sort of translate. And so I know Brian felt comfortable, and knowing Brian as I do, yes, he should have skated.
Well, we saw him perform 2 career best performances back to back before then coming down a bit for Japanese nationals. As a coach, how do you address it? How do you get a skater up when obviously physically they need to kind of come down a bit? And how much did he use last year's World Championship disappointment to help him this season?
That disappointment has fueled his whole year. And his disappointment at Skate Canada. And disappointment, and that's what a champion does, takes that disappointment and uses it as fuel. It doesn't become, oh my God, I wasn't very good and blah, blah, blah. He just looked at me and says, I have regrets. I said, you have what? He says, I have regrets, and then how do I, and Brian's very, very good at that. Brian, because of, his history as a skater, and then also his work with the other skaters, has an innate sense of being able to find that line. And so it's a real balance, and every skater's different. And you come up with a plan, and we will put a plan on paper, but it's pretty loose because this is what you're going to work towards. But if something comes up and you realize the skater is really tired, then it's like, okay, you need to get out, you need to rest your body, you need to listen. And so for Yuzuru, he's a lot of it for Yuzuru is managing his body because he has to be really careful. I know he likes to be really careful about keeping his body healthy and minimizing the risk for injury. And so it's really, you hope, that you have enough weeks. I like to have at least 5 weeks before Worlds where you can just be doing consistent training so that, and you basically, you start out with, we're not going for perfect. Do not think this is Worlds here, and don't try to compete with that. This is about training. This is about getting it done. This is about upping the averages, etc.
Well, speaking of plans, we have seen Hanyu practice an incredible quad loop, often in the exhibitions. So just how close is it to being included in the program, and will we see it at Worlds?
I don't know. That'll be up to Yuzuru, and we're a little far out. He's in Japan right now, coming back. I believe it is next week, and that will be up to him. I doubt if he'll do it this year in competition. However, his loop is beautiful, and it can go at the beginning of a program. I think that will come up. I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted. But
send us a text or something. Well, in addition to coaching Yuzuru, you also worked alongside Yuna Kim, and both she and Hanyu, they have the weight of entire countries on their shoulders heading into these events. So is that something, you spoke a little bit earlier about her just breaking down before the Olympics. As a coach, do you ever address that? Do you talk about that? Or is it just something that's implicitly stated, all of that pressure? I mean, how do you address that?
Well, it was what the beauty of it for Yuna going into the Olympics in Vancouver. Brian Orser was the skater the last time the Olympics were in Canada that had the weight of the country. He was, I think, the only gold medal favorite of the entire country going into those games. And so he remembered that. I had it to some degree, not the degree that Brian did. And yes, we talk about it. It's such a factor. And then, and as soon as you address it, things sort of go away. And Brian's amazing that way, and amazing with Yuzu, because of the experience that he's had himself as a skater with Yuna and now with Yuzu. There's nobody better in terms of knowing exactly what that's like, just a sense, and being able to find those words to move the skaters to move them in the right direction and the place of sort of ownership, control of what they can control.
Is that his philosophy? I mean, I'm sure what he says to them is different per each situation, but is it a sense of this is your skating as opposed to doing this for somebody else? I mean, what is the gist of the message he's trying to get across to them?
Yes, I think the message is it is personal. It's about you and what you're capable of, and it's one step at a time. And that step can be where you're at Skate Canada, where you've been in training coming in. You can't all of a sudden go out and try to land 4 quads if in practice you've barely been doing 1. I mean, there's a realistic sense of where you're at in your training, how you got there, and what you're capable of. And so that's what allows a skater that honesty, that allows them that sort of comfort. They're not trying to do something that's virtually impossible. And also the training of, if you try to be perfect, well, we all know that is rare, and jumps are rarely perfect. So chances are it's not going to feel perfect. You failed. So let's forget perfect. Let's go, and you got to open yourself up to deal with whatever it is, because you can miss the first quad and go on to win the Worlds or the Olympics, if you have the presence of mind to deal with that.
Well, Javier Fernandez will be defending, or hopefully trying to defend his world title in a few weeks. And he hasn't always been known for his focus during his performances and also in training. So how have you addressed that, and what is he like to coach?
He's a natural talent who, again, natural, has come by it so honestly. He comes from Spain. He doesn't come from a skating family. I mean, you guys are around rinks. The skaters, many of the skaters, they're open. They've got opportunities around them. They have parents leading the charge and managing it. Javi has none of that, except this pure talent and an absolute love of skating. And Javi's just been really fun to watch. I don't know how many years he's been at the cricket club, but the first summer he came and I started a stroking class, he got off the ice. Like, stroking started, and we said, where are you going? He says, I'm tired. It's like, well, yeah, come on. So anyway, and from there, he is, you talk about losing focus, that has changed started to change last year, big time. And that was the difference you saw at the World Championships in him. His practices at Worlds in terms of being organized. He is somebody now who nothing happens by accident. He is really in the driver's seat. He's got Yuzu there as a measure, and he really has a lot of respect for him and what he's capable of. He loves his sport. He has a lot of respect for everybody, all of the skaters that are in the sport. But he's a hard worker, and he's totally open. He's totally open to learning and to input.
Well, Nam Nguyen had a remarkable season last year, but he did have a rough national. So how is he currently doing?
How is he doing? I think probably a weight has been lifted. He won't be at 4 continents at Worlds. He's been training well. Of course, the quads are coming now, and that often happens, right, when the pressure's off. I think, his age, his growth, defending a title, it was a perfect storm this season, and it was a perfect storm that sort of pushed him down. I think that pressure, and he has to do what we see the champions do. You learn from it. You learn from it, and you move on, and you hopefully rise up. And so it's full speed ahead. He's looking ahead at next year and what he has to do, and we'll see where he takes it.
Well, Jenny is very tough on Nam's camel while I focus on the skating skills more. So is the camel position being worked on?
Oh, yes.
Okay, good.
And actually, And that was the other thing along with the quads, the spins. It's like, where were those? Where were those spins a month ago? Really? I think, he's a kid who has worked very, very hard, has had tremendous success. And part of that tremendous success has been his acquisition of triple axels and quads when he needed them. And that's what got him there. And it's very difficult to let go of that when that's what you know and that's what you've trusted. And that's part of maturity too. And so now as he matures and realizes, okay, I now have to bring, because he can do the other stuff, he has to bring it out. He has to bring it out into the competition, and he's got to take a risk. It's a real risk to actually do that, right? Mm-hmm. You've got your safe place, and your safe place is sort of in here and kind of feeling relaxed and soft and everything on the jumps and getting ready for the jumps. Well, now you got to go out of that safe place, and you got to take risk, and you got to stretch, and you got to take that energy into the spins, and then you got to feel like you want to throw up and that your lungs are burning, and you got to work through that every day to be able to get it into competition.
Well, can all positions be fixed? Could Yuna's spiral be fixed, Tracy?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. But then each skater has their uniqueness and their quirkiness. And, sometimes they're open to it and other times they aren't. And sometimes I think one of the things as a coach is actually you learn to start to trust their intuition a lot. So even, when you have a skater who has unorthodox ways of working, as a Javier had, you can learn from that, and you can learn how actually parts of that way are better. And so anyways, I believe everything can be fixed and everything can be better. Yes, but...
Well, Elizabeth Turzenbayeva appears to be very intense and focused when we've watched her. So what should we expect from her in the future?
That she will be determined and focused, and hopefully she'll start smiling. Yes, no.
I was noticing that at Skate America, she had such a pretty short program, and I thought, she just smiles. She's so pretty. And
yeah, she said the other day, I can't breathe and smile at the same time. And I said, yes, you can. Yes, you can.
If Tracy can do it, you can do it.
Oh, dear.
Well, you also started adding a couple of Canadian ladies to the mix, Gabby and Elaine. Is it Elaine Chartrand? We have a discussion about how
Elaine
do you...
Chartrand.
What is it like? What is your role in terms of coaching with those two women? And is Brian their head coach? Because we see a myriad of coaches with them from time to time.
For Elaine, Michelle Lee is the head coach. For Gabby, Lee Barkel.
Okay.
Ryan works in tandem with them. And and so does a lot of work with them. It's a real partnership. And then I just come in and help. And it's really back to the philosophy of people can come and they can skate and make each other better. And this is not about isolating yourself and being afraid of the competition. This is about everybody collectively lifting the sport. And I think that we all saw the benefits of it at the Canadian Championships in both of their performances there. And because, you're used to it, Canadians, one great skate if you're lucky, and to see that kind of fight and that kind of level was really heartening. I mean, you thought I was gushing. I was gushing because there have been a lot of years of hoping that somebody lands a triple Lutz, right? Okay.
Given all the success that you've had with other skaters, should we start to become concerned about the Canadian ladies? Do we have to worry about them now for our Ashley and Gracie? Ashley
and Gracie are, I think, in great shape. I love watching them. I look forward to see how they both do in Boston. And, I think I'm going to just get on a little bit of a soapbox here now with the women's skating. I think sometimes we really fail to give credit to the speed and power of some of these skaters. And I don't think so much in men's skating, but I think often in the women's skating, the cute factor can come into play in the second mark. And I don't think it's sustainable. I think it's cute this year, but it's not next year. And good skating is good this year and good next year. It's sustainable. And I really give credit to Ashley and Gracie, because you and I are discussing with the men about the difficulty of the line and the spins and all of the detail and why skaters choose to leave it out. Well, they're choosing to do it, and they deserve full credit for it because it's exhausting. And their mind is constantly on the difficulties of the triple jumps, but it's also on the complexity and the nuances in the choreography and the detail in the spins. And I think that as a sport, we have to be very, very careful how we assess the women skaters, and we don't give away marks for cute. Look at how the patterns fill out the rink. Just look at that, and that gives you a big answer in terms of the skating skills.
Well, as we wrap things up, we want to bring you back to the 90s on CBS. Now, you witnessed Roz going for that double axel every weekend and Katarina Witt dressing up as a man, doing all sorts of programs. But Oksana Bayul was undoubtedly the star of every one of those broadcasts with her lamp and all of her outrageous costumes and her capes. So what is your best Oksana memory?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but no, Oksana, I think it was when she told off Andrea Joyce in the Kiss and Cry.
Yeah.
She actually did. And poor Andrea, it actually stopped her dead in her tracks. And not much stops my dear friend Andrea Joyce dead in her tracks. It stopped her dead in her tracks. She went bright red and kind of went, okay.
Well, thank you for coming on this skating lesson, Tracy. We are so excited to hear the rest of your commentary this season and to see the work that you've done with these skaters. So thank you for giving us your time today and talking about everything.
It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to listening to you both throughout the season and into next year.